Join the Discord, link down in the description. Thank you. Hello everybody, in today's video we're going to be making an exotic weapon tier list in terms of PvP. So I have every single exotic down here in roughly alphabetical order. There might be a few that are a space or two off, but it should be in alphabetical order for you. And we're just going to be ranking it, your typical tier list going from S through D. And then I also have an awful tier, which is just like, there's no reason to use it. Like there are some bad exotics in PvP, but they still have a little bit of a play. If like they can be kind of fun for like quick play or something, but then awful is just like there's no reason you'd ever need to use this exotic ever. There's just no play for it. And obviously we have primary, special, and heavies on here. I'm just going to be kind of ranking how good they are. Obviously a heavy weapon is going to be better than a primary weapon, but I'm going to kind of be basing it off of like in terms of like the heavy weapons together, the special weapons together. So just because, it's a heavy, obviously a rocket launcher is going to one shot. So no matter what, it's going to already be better than your average primary, but I'll be kind of basing it off of that, just kind of how good it is. And then in terms of the skill level, I'm going to kind of be basing this on like an average skill level for player, because there are certain weapons on this list that are actually really, really strong if you put the time in and you get really good with it. But for your average player, it's not really going to be that great. So I'm going to go with kind of just the base average if you use certain weapons, because like I said, I'll get into it once we start, talking about certain weapons. For each weapon, I'll explain why I put it in each tier. And then I'll explain kind of like, if it is one of those like weapons that you need to have like a lot of experience with, I'll explain why I'm putting it in the certain tier and what it could be if you get really good with it. And I'm also going to be talking about the weapons right now, not what they were. I'll talk a little bit about the history of the weapon if need be, but for the most part, it's going to be what it is currently now in the game. But nonetheless, we have a lot of weapons to get through, so let's get into it. So starting off, we have Egger's Scepter. Now, this is a trace rifle. It can be really, really strong if you get your super. At one point in the game when you could get your supers really, really quickly, it was really good. But nowadays, I think it's a good trace rifle. I'd put it in the B category. I think it's not the worst trace rifle by any means, and if you use your super, it can be great. I know with Mantle and Battle Harmony, you can get your super somewhat kind of quick with it, and you can use it that way, or depending on the game mode, if you're playing like momentum control or something, it can be kind of fun. But for the most part, it's your average trace. The slow is kind of nice, if I'm going to be honest. It can slow people down, help you get some multi-kills, but overall, it's nothing super crazy. Just kind of a mid-tier trace rifle, if I'm being honest. Arbalest at one point was a supreme menace in the Crucible. It was super, super crazy, but they've lowered the aim assist, made it not as good. Disruption break is still pretty good on it, but that's more for your other teammates. Doesn't really do much for you, obviously. I'll also put this one in the B just because it still does have a pretty sizable hitbox, but from my experience, snipers are overall just better. Anarchy, lots of fun, but not really a reason to use it. You can get the occasional kill with it, and it's kind of memey. I have a friend that loves using this thing in PvP, but no reason to ever use it. Ace of Spades, very strong S tier pick, one of the strongest hand cannons in the game. 140, has infinite kill clip, third eye, high cal. It has all the things you'd ever want on a hand cannon. Ace of Spades, if you put it anywhere but S tier for PvP, I don't know what you're doing. The Bloodline, obviously, I don't actually own this thing, so I haven't used it, but rocket sidearms aren't that great in PvP. They're just don't hit anything for whatever reason. The hitbox on them is terrible. The tracking is really bad. So I would assume this thing is not great. Maybe if you have it and you like it or something, you could make a fight for D, but I don't see it being any higher than this, so we're just going to put it there. Bastion. At one point, Bastion was like S tier. It was so, so good, but since then, it's been nerfed a lot. I think other fusions are better, so we're just going to put it in C, and the buff that it got recently was like a 1-2 punch, which I'm sure you could make some like funny plays with it, but it's not that practical by any means. Back Juju. Actually not a terrible exotic. It can essentially have Rampage on it. It gets some super energy back, but the Pulse Rifle archetype isn't the greatest, so I'm just going to put it in C. It's just, you never really see it, and the amount that I've used it, it's just kind of like, I've used it an okay amount, but it's just meh. Black Talon, honestly, really good heavy weapon. The range is pretty crazy. You can 3-peek with it because it's a sword. Really, really good heavy weapon, if I'm being honest, especially if you want to use a sword. And those projectiles that it sends out track like super, super hard. It's kind of crazy. Borealis, this might seem like a little bit of an interesting choice for a high tier, but I'm going to put it in an A. If you don't know, This thing is super crazy. The hitbox on it is ginormous when you use the Void. You get increased stability, which is a crazy amount to help prevent flinch. This thing is super, super strong in PvP. A lot of controller players that I know have honestly say that it's one of the best for controller specifically. So I highly recommend you give it a try in PvP if you haven't already. Obviously, you're getting rid of your exotic slot, but a lot of time if you're using like Rose or Messenger or whatever it may be, you're not even using your exotic slot anyway. But this thing is super, super strong, honestly. The base stat package is kind of absurd on it. Centrifuge, I love this exotic. I think it's super, super fun. It's just kind of mediocre though. I think it's B. You can definitely get the job done. And if you're good with it, like it can do a lot. The blinding explosions are fantastic. And like I said, I personally love this gun, but it's nothing super crazy. Conditional finality, S tier, though they did nerf the handling a little bit and they made it so you can't freeze wells. It's still great for countering other supers. It's still pretty consistent and the handling is still 80 if I'm not mistaken. So it's still very, very strong. Collected obligation. This is the Vow raid. And I think it's a good pulse if you build into it. It's just a lot of work to try to make it work, honestly. Having to try to keep your buffs up. If you do and get good at keeping your void buffs up, I think it probably is it's probably like a B+ tier because it can be pretty good if you get all the buffs going, but it's just a lot to manage in PvP. And if you die, I'm gonna put it in C. It's a super fun gun to use, but it's like if you can get really good at managing it, it can be great for quick play. But even for trials or comp, it's still not the greatest just because it resets your buffs every round and it's not really worth it. And the archetype isn't the greatest. But I do think if you get good with it, you can probably get it more so a B+ tier. But as it sits right now for your average player, it's definitely just a C. Also, Void isn't in the strongest state right now for PvP. So it's just kind of whatever. Cryosthesia, this is an A. It's so good. You get a kill, you get another free kill into a snipe or a throwing knife or whatever it may be. It's just super, super good. The only downside is it feels a little bit weird of a sidearm to get used to, and this base stat package on it as a sidearm isn't the greatest compared to some of our other sidearms, but it's still really, really strong. I thoroughly enjoy using this thing no matter what I'm playing, just because it essentially you get one free kill after you get a normal kill. It's so good. Then Cloud Strike, really good, S tier. Obviously, they've nerfed it a little bit, but like getting a headshot and getting rewarded free kills every now and then is just, that's so good, especially in something like Control or something where you can just take out an entire point where you know people are going to be. If you can get a good map that you can get over to the spawn quick enough, it's so good. With a sniper, you're supposed to be hitting a headshot anyway, so the fact that you're rewarded super heavily for that is nuts. The only downside to Cloud Strike, honestly, is that it's a 140, but nonetheless, it's still a fantastic sniper. Cerberus, we're going to put it in awful. It's just not good. Occasionally, if somebody pushes you, you can melt them really, really fast. But for the most part, it's not really going to happen. No reason to be using Cerberus. Crimson, actually really good. I think if you are a controller player, it's probably A tier. If you're an M&K player, it's probably B tier. I don't think it's necessarily as bad on M&K as a lot of people make it out to be. You just need to aim a little bit better. But for the most part, it is really good. I'm honestly just going to put it in A because I think it is really, really strong. You just need to get used to it. And the healing and the reloading, the chaining capabilities of Crimson is super good. I always love using Crimson whenever I use it for a video. And yeah, it's just super, super strong. And that's coming from an M&K player. So it's not like I'm a controller biased in terms of Crimson. Then we have Cold Heart, which is just, it can make some plays, but I'm just going to put it in D. I don't think it's awful, but there's definitely better trace rifles out there than Cold Heart. And it's Cold Heart. It's just kind of been power crept out of the game. At one point, it was pretty good, and there's just so many other things now. Then we have Dragon's Breath, which can be a fun in like quick play and stuff. You can get a fair amount of kills with it, but overall, there are definitely better heavies. I'll put it in D. I don't think it's awful, but it's all right. Dead Messenger. This is pretty bad nowadays. It used to be really good because at one point it did 130 damage. We only had 200 HP. It made it super easy to take people out because you could literally hit them with like a Stormcaller melee or any other melees. And it was really, really good, but they lowered the damage to make the point that it's just not good, especially when we have a bunch of other waveframes that are just infinitely better. I would never bother with Dead Messenger nowadays. And then we have DMT, which I think is A tier. I think it's really good. Whether you play controller or M and K, I think it's really good nowadays. Back in the day, it was like S tier on M and K, and then it was like C tier on controller. But I think they've done a pretty good job at making it balanced on both now. And it's just really good. The hipfire feels pretty good nowadays. The ADS is really, really good, especially at longer range. I don't think it's necessarily the best by any means, but it's still really strong of a scout rifle. If anything, A might be, it would probably be like an A minus. I don't feel right putting it in B, but I don't think it's anything like so out of the box. Like, I don't think it's anything super crazy, but it's still really, really good. We have the Void machine gun. This is awful. I honestly forget its name right now, but it's just really, really bad. Then we have this arc fusion, which again, I'm also forgetting the name of. Really, really bad for whatever reason. It has a horizontal spread. This is probably one of the worst weapons in the game, like by far. I would never recommend using this thing ever. Duality, which recently got its bug fix. I think Duality is S tier. This thing is so good. The hipfire is really, really good. And as the hipfire is really, really good, as well as the ADS being a slug. It's just such a good shotgun. Like, it's just so consistent. And very, very strong slug. We have Devil's Ruin. I think Devil's Ruin's... I don't really know exactly where Devil's Ruin is sitting. Before all the like health changes and whatnot that we have now, it was really good. Honestly, I think it was like high A tier, because that beam would take you down so fast. And if you match somebody who was good with it, it was so hard to do anything. But that beam, you have to like hit it all now and hit some headshots to really like make it work. So I'm probably going to put it in C tier. It's a good sidearm. If you get good with it and can hit your shots, it becomes like, it goes up the tier list. But for the most part, for your average players, it's just you're not really going to do a whole lot with it. Deathbringer, very fun in quick play, not the greatest in comp or anything. We'll put it in C because you can get a lot of fun kills with it in quick play, especially when people don't see it coming. And it can help you get kill chains a lot because you can fire it into a spawn and then run a different way. And they can help you get, your 4 pieces, your 5 pieces occasionally. But overall, it's just nothing super crazy because it is pretty easy to avoid if the enemy players know what you're using. Divinity, kind of a meme, but I'm going to put it in C. I think it actually is better than Cold Hard, if I'm being honest with you. That bubble makes it so you can't miss a headshot, as well as being able to pair it with melee capabilities. You can team shot with your teammates. I'm not going to say it's the greatest thing in the world, because for the most part, you're going to lose most 1v1s. But if you know how to play it, Divinity players can actually be pretty cool, like pretty good. Darcy, I'm not going to say it's awful. I think it's C, honestly. You get a lot of sniper ammo when you grab heavy. Compared to other heavies, it's not the greatest in the world. But if you're a good sniper, it could be a lot of fun. And yeah, it's not bad. Ergo Sum, I haven't really seen it a whole lot. I know there are some crazy plays you can do with it because it kind of swipes super, super far. But you have to get a lot of ammo for it to work. And I'm just going to put it in D. Like, it's all right. It's a fun special. You could make it work, but meh. The new raid exotic, I actually don't own this one yet, so I have yet to be able to try it. But I'm pretty sure it does not kill in one of the bursts. You have to hit 2 or 3 of them, which in turn kind of makes it whatever, in my opinion. I feel like you're better off using like Arbalest or Lorentz when that comes up. So I'm just going to put it in D. I don't think it's the greatest. Obviously, I could be completely wrong on this one. I honestly don't know. I haven't really seen it, so I don't think it's super crazy. But again, I currently don't own it, so I cannot try it. This thing is awful, really bad. Can be kind of fun for the Moth build, but it's just like it does so little damage. It's just not worth it. In terms of the glaives, well, we'll come back to the Hunter one. We'll talk about that one last. The Bubble one can be kind of fun, but we're going to put D. The Warlock one is just really bad, awful. But the Hunter one is actually really, really good if you can get good with it. For your average player, I'm probably going to put it in C, but to note, if you are really good with this thing, I think it can be A tier. If you are really, really good with glaives, this thing is nuts. For good players who are seasons with it, A tier. For your average player, C tier. We're just going to put it in C for right now. But like, just note, if you really want to get good with this thing, it can be so strong. That lightning that it can send out is so good, and the tracking is super crazy on it. And it's just, it's so funny. It's such a fun glaive to use, if I'm being honest. Eyes of Tomorrow can get a lot of multi-kills, and theoretically, if you can constantly take out 4 people with it, you could have infinite ammo, but that's never going to happen, so I don't think it's awful. I will put it in D. I think it's better than all of these, where all of these just like don't really have a purpose in PvP, if I'm being honest with you. Where this one, it's like, you can make it work. It can come in with some fun plays. Ariana's Vow, I think it's B tier. Great for quick swapping. Really annoying to play against, but very, very strong. Firing it, then switching to a 120 and hitting them with it. Very, very strong. And then final warning. Now, when I said a skill gap weapon, this is the main one I'm talking about, because for 99% of people, it's like awful or D tier. But for that 1% that takes time to actually learn how to use this thing, I think it's S tier, which is kind of crazy that this weapon that auto aims for you has such a high skill gap. It's very important you position correctly. You have to make sure you hold target and make it track long enough. And it's great for movement-based players. But for your average player, it's either D or C. I'll probably put it in C just because if you're on the low end of the skill bracket, like really low end, it's probably really strong because you could just sit in a lane, like lock onto somebody, and they're not going to hit you as much, and you can probably take them out before they get you. But then once you get to that mid average, you can't really do that anymore, and then you just die. Then once you get to the higher average again, that's when you start to get really good with it, and then you get it to S tier. So we'll put it for C for your average player, because I think that's probably about where it would be for your average player. But for your like really below average players, it's probably really good, just because again, you could sit in the open. And then for your really good players who get really good with it, it's really strong. But for most people, it's C. I can't wait for people to go to the end of the video and be like, how did you put final warning in C tier? It's blah, 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 blah. And who didn't actually watch this part of the video. Okay, we got Forerunner, which is A tier, super strong. You get a lot of special, 3 tapping capabilities from really far range, and it's just super, super good. Forerunner, so strong. The only real downside is in primary fights, occasionally you can get flinched pretty hard, but for the most part, it's just super, super good. Now we got Fighting Lion, which is another skill-based one, which is again kind of funny because it's a grenade launcher. If you're really good with it, I'd say it's probably A tier, but for 99% of players who do not put time into it, I'm going to put in D tier. But there are some people who make it really, really work. And it can really do a lot of damage. And fighting against a good Fighting Lion player is really obnoxious and can be hard to deal with, if I'm being honest with you. So again, just to clarify, because I know people are going to comment it, A for it if you're like a veteran player and good with it. But for 99% of the player base, D tier. Grand Overture, just really bad. It's okay for PvE in terms of like some boss DPS, especially when there's arc surges. But for PvP, it's just really bad. You're never going to get hit enough to charge it up to, spray it down on a whole bunch of people. So it's just kind of whatever. Gjallarhorn, I put it in A tier. It used to be really, really strong when the proximity was like really crazy on it, and all the Wolfpack rounds also did more damage. At one point, they would literally one-shot you. It was super crazy. But overall, it's probably the best rocket in the game for PvP, just because you can, have Wolfpacks, and they still do a bit of damage. So overall, not too bad. Graviton Lance, I think it's A tier once they fix the bug that's on it currently. Obviously, it's firing a little bit slower, but it is a very strong pulse rifle in my honest opinion. I thoroughly love it. The aim assist is really high. You can take out supers pretty easily with Vorpal, and overall, the explosions that it creates, actually, though it got nerfed not too long, I guess it's been a while, honestly. Wow, time flies. But nonetheless, the explosion actually do a fair amount of damage and will net you occasional amount of multi-kills. I think Graviton's Lance is really, really good on longer range maps. Obviously, if you're playing like Endless Veil, it's going to go down to like a D tier, but on longer range maps, if you play your distance right, it's actually really, really good. Hierarchy of Need, really bad. Probably one of the worst exotics in the game. Probably the worst primary in the game for PvP. Really bad. Harsh Shadow can go invisible, and the little seeker out things aren't bad as well. So I'll put it in D tier. It's nothing crazy. It's just a sword. Unfortunately, if you don't have a sword that has a lot of range, it's just not worth it. I feel like you kind of need Eager or Black Talon to have the projectile send out to really make a sword super viable in PvP. But overall, it can make for some fun and interesting plays. Hawkmoon, S tier, very good. One of the best 140s. Realistically, it's like right below Ace. I think it depends on your playstyle, which one is better, but overall, I'd say for the majority of players, Ace is better, but Hawkmoon is just so good. Being able to 1 or 2 tap people, and it's just amazing. And then we have Heir Apparent, which at one point this thing was like S++ tier. It was like so far higher up, but then they made it so the shield is a lot easier to destroy. So it's just like, it's a C tier. You can't really do much with it, but it can shred. And if people aren't using arc weapons, it's still pretty good, but overall it's nowhere near what it once was. Hardlight, I put it in B tier. I think Hardlight's really, really good. I think it's very underrated. The few times I've used it in like recent months, it's been really strong. We have Izanagi's, which as of recently with all the special you can collect, I actually don't think it's a bad pick. I'm going to put it in B tier because it's like, it's not the best sniper in it. it's not the best sniper in the world by any means. And obviously something like Trials, you're not going to get enough ammo to get the honed edge ×4. But if you're playing in quick play or even comp, depending on the game mode, like you can get enough ammo to one-shot body shot people pretty consistently. It's actually not bad. And no distraction makes it a decent hard scoping sniper. And it's an all right sniper. It's nothing super crazy. There's definitely better. But just due to the special being a lot more accessible nowadays, it's really, really good. Jotun, I'll put it in C tier. It can get the job done. It can fire some crazy shots that I've been hit like by such curveballs from Jotun. It's actually absurd, but obviously it's pretty easy to counter. If you really want to play against a Jotun player, you treat it as you would most other fusions, where you just really hug the wall and you don't play in the open. Or if you're playing Dawnblade or Hunter, you just dodge out of the way. So it's really easy to counter, but there is occasions where you get hit by a Jotun and the shot is kind of like so crazy that you're just in awe. Kvastov, obviously it's gotten nerfed a bit, but I'll put it in A tier. I know a lot of people will be like, what do you mean? It's S tier, it's so good. But it's like, I just think you can counter it. So if you're using a hand cannon and peak shotting, or honestly an SMG, it's just like, it's really good. I just don't think it's top of the meta good by any means, if I'm being honest. The aim assist makes it incredibly easy to use, and that is the reason that I think most people use it. But I don't think it's necessarily better than like all of these weapons or even some of our legendary weapons. Lorentz, I think it's better than Arbalest, so I'll also put it in A. I think it takes a little bit to get used to, but if you can actually get good with it, honestly, the fact that you can get kind of like a cloud strike effect with it when you hit headshots is really, really strong. And the fact that you can pick up the amulets, it is still really, really good. It's a lot harder to use than it was back in the day in terms of like hitting the headshots. And also, you got to get used to the linear. But I do think Lorentz is still really, really good. Leviathan's Breath, it's a heavy weapon, can be fun. I think it's C tier. It one-shots. It can be fun, but nothing super crazy on that. Lumina, I think it's a B tier pick. In terms of a support exotic for helping other people, if you do build crafting, it can be pretty good, but the gun itself at base is just kind of, it's okay. It's mid. It's better than a lot of others, but you can definitely get the job done. And it is kind of nice that you will always essentially have some form of damage buff on yourself, making the gun just a little bit better, as well as helping out your team. But it doesn't really have anything else going for it other than that. But I mean, a damage buff is still good. Le Monarch, I think it's B tier. Obviously, at one point, this thing like terrified the Crucible, but bows just aren't in the craziest spot in the moment, which is fine. It's a mid-tier pick. I think there's better bows. Lord of Wolves, at one point, terrorized the Crucible, but nowadays, I don't think it's awful by any means. And I think it's a little bit a Bev D as well. So we'll put it in C. It can kill. There's just better shotguns nowadays than Lord of Wolves, but it's not terrible because we'll put it in C. It can get the job done. Legion Acreus, it's a heavy shotgun. I'll put it in C though, because it can do well. It's just the low handling really hurts it in terms of PvP. You kind of just need to run around with it out. But if you hit fire somebody, you kind of just destroy them. But it is heavy. So now I'm gonna be honest, I still don't own this exotic trace rifle, so I don't know how good it is, but seeing as I haven't really seen it and it is a heavy weapon, I'm probably just gonna put it in D. I don't really want to say it's awful without technically using it myself, but we will put it in D just because, again, I haven't really seen it. And again, it's a heavy weapon. There are just better heavy weapons. Honestly, in my mind, why would you not just use a machine gun? Now, Monte Carlo, this one actually surprised me. I made a video on this one the other day if you want to check that out. But nonetheless, I think Monte Carlo is actually really, really good. I think the thing that puts it behind Kvastov is Kvastov has higher aim assist and more zoom, which makes it just more consistent and easier to use. But honestly, Monte Carlo, I'm going to put it in A tier just because it is super, super strong. 600 auto rifles are pretty good right now, being, Kvastov and Summoner. And the fact that you can get your melees back as like easily with this thing, like if you're a hunter, you literally throw a smoke on somebody, kill them with this thing, and it can just give you your smoke right back. And obviously you can get your dodge to get your smoke, but it just makes it so you have so many smokes. And then if you're a warlock, you can use your chain lightning abilities all the time. You can use Peregrine Greaves with Titan. And it's just like, this thing is really, really good, honestly. I'm surprised more people do not use Monte Carlo. I thoroughly enjoyed it and I've used it a fair amount this past week. Malfeasance. Now this thing is great for team shotting. And other than that, it's pretty bad. We're going to put it in, I don't feel right putting it in C. I'm honestly going to put it in D. If you're team shotting with your teammates, it goes probably to like a B, but just by itself, it's definitely a D. There's no reason to use it. It's just really bad. 180 hand cannons are kind of whatever nowadays. Now, Mida, this is a D tier pick. There's just no reason to use Mida nowadays. There are so many better scout rifles, and it sucks. I loved Mida. Back in Destiny 1, I was an avid Mida enjoyer. Especially in year 3, you ran around with Mida sidearm on bigger maps. You get around so fast. So good. So good, but nowadays it's just so bad. And I feel like the hit detection on it is really wonky. That might just be a me thing, but I don't know. Merciless, actually crazy high stat package for a fusion. I'm going to put it in B tier because the exotic perk actually can come into play occasionally, depending on the situation, making it so it will charge a little bit quicker. And then if you have the catalyst, the stat package on this thing is absolutely ridiculous. It is a very strong fusion. And with all the special ammo we have now, it also essentially has a kill clip on it. So if you reload, you just get so much damage. Merciless is so good if you are a fusion enjoyer. Yeah, there's not really much to say about it. Merciless is just so strong. Necrochasm. With the exotic catalyst getting a little bit of a change, it can actually be pretty good for quick play. I think for quick play and pub stomping, this thing is very, very strong, but its base stat package isn't the greatest, and also its range isn't the strongest either. So I'm going to put it in the high end of B tier. You can make it work, especially if you build into it using like Devour and stuff. And this thing can go crazy in kill chaining lobbies, and it's just like, it's so good. But the base auto rifle itself isn't the greatest. Once you get the perks going, great. But for your average player that isn't necessarily farming every single lobby, it's definitely not the best, but I'd say it's a good exotic. No time to explain, easy S tier, so good. Once you get the little buddy going, you just take anybody down. It makes it so easy to get 2 bursts with it. And the stability is just super good on this thing. It's really, really stable. Not really much to say about No Time. I have a lot of kills on my No Time to explain. Just very, very strong pick. Now, Osteostriga. Now, I will say a lot of people are probably going to immediately be like, it's awful, which I don't necessarily think it's true. I think it's awful if you're fighting against other SMG players or other sidearm players, like close range players. It can be like really, really hard to play against them. But if you're playing against like hand cannons or scout rifles, pulse rifles, whatever it may be, if you get in their face with Osteostriga, it actually can shred them pretty quickly, if I'm being honest. It's just those other faster firing, like close range options will take you out pretty quick, or you'll result in a trade just due to the travel time. But this thing, as long as you fire in their general like head vicinity, it will guarantee you headshots. It's actually not as bad as a lot of people would make it out to be. It's just hard, again, to play against other close range options. Now, Outbreak Perfected. This is an interesting one because I feel like every time I make one of my top weapon videos, like my top 15 weapon videos for every season or episode now, I guess, everybody goes, where's Outbreak? Outbreak. I love Outbreak. And it's just like, the archetype isn't the greatest. The nanites can occasionally net you some kills or help you out, but it's just like, I just think it's like a high C tier pick. It's just nothing crazy. If the archetype was a little bit better, maybe. It doesn't do it for me. I don't see what people understand about Outbreak. Obviously, it's very stable, but it's, in my mind, why would I ever want to use an Outbreak over a No Time? It's just so much better. It's literally a night and day shooting experience. But if you like it, that's cool. But in my mind, I do not see it being anything further than C tier. Then we got 1K, which can be a lot of fun, but it's one shot. It whiffs a lot. We'll put it in D tier. It's better than awful, but it's not much. But yeah. Parasite, actually a pretty good heavy. You have to get close to really make it work, but I'll put it in C tier. There's, again, still better options, but you can kind of just fly in and nuke a group of people with it. I personally really like using it because I think it's a lot of fun, especially in quick play. And if you can get the damage going, get some kills, you can like nuke supers with it, and it is a lot of fun. Not great by any means, but it's definitely better than most of the other heavies on the list so far. Polaris Lance, this is an A tier. Very, very good. Obviously, the Scorch Bullet doesn't really do the most nowadays. It can occasionally net you kills or help you get people behind walls or even just prevent somebody from healing. But just the Scout Rifle is just so good. Obviously, you have to use it from like a longer range. But if you're flying around with like a Dawn Blade with Polaris Lance, it's just so strong. You kind of just take people out. So much range, 3 taps. 150 Scouts are just really, really good on long range maps. Then we have Prometheus Lens, which I actually think is A tier. I think it's so good. It kills so fast. And now that we get more special ammo nowadays, it's such a good trace rifle. It's probably the best one in the game, like by far. Just so strong. Quicksilver Storm. It's C tier. The grenades don't really do a whole lot for you. They had a niche play when they could destroy well, or I mean, they could still destroy wells, but they had a niche play when Well was like the super meta and they could do decent damage to bubbles and all that stuff, but it's just like, it's not worth it. They don't do anything to players really. And Quicksilver Storm, just though a very fun gun, not meta by any means. Red Death, this is an easy one. It's S tier. Lots of healing, it has lots of healing, and the stability on it is really, really good. The catalyst that it's gotten now is really good. It makes sense why this one's top of the charts in every Trials Report weekend. Very, very strong, sitting right next to No Time. I personally prefer No Time because I prefer the lethality of No Time, but Red Death, the healing, it's just so good. Very, very good. Revision 0, though it's a lot of fun, I'm going to put it in B tier. It's nothing so outstanding. Again, I would rather use Red Death or No Time than Revision, but the sniper can see some play, especially if you can get good at hitting those headshots and holding off on it, especially in something like Trials. If you can add enough headshots, like if you're playing a very slow team, it can be good. It can be good, but it's definitely not the most optimal weapon by any means. We have Ruinous Effigy, and for fun factor, I want to put this thing in like S++ tier, but in lethality case, we're going to put it in D. I love this thing. It's so fun being able to, you know, dunk people. You put on blink and you dunk them. Super, super fun. Not the most practical, but that's okay. Not every exotic needs to be practical. Rat King, I think Rat King's an interesting one. I think it's either high A tier or S tier. I'm honestly going to put it in S tier just because it is so good. The amount of healing that you can get, the invis, all that is just so good. Obviously, you have to get a little good with it, and it is a sidearm, and it doesn't have the most range by any means, but it is super, super strong if you can get good with it. Plus, if you play with other people using Rat King, getting the Rat Pack perk going, it's just so strong. Risk Runner, it has a lot of range. The zoom isn't the greatest, so it's just, we're going to put it in C. It's decent if you're playing a lot of people using Arc, but for the most part, we're not playing that many people using Arc. The only thing that people are using Arc nowadays are the Hunter Super, if I'm being honest with you, but you're just going to die and not proc Risk Runner with that. And yeah, if Arc is ever the meta, it can kind of go up like a tier or two maybe, but for the most part, I just put it in C. Not the greatest, but it's okay. It has some okay range on it, and it can be a decent shooting experience. Still Hunt. Now, I think Still Hunt's really, really good the better the sniper you are. If you're really good at hitting headshots, I honestly think it can be A tier. But for your average player who's not necessarily getting the perk going that much, I still think it is a good sniper. So we are going to put it in B tier just because it feels good. I've hit some pretty crazy shots with it, if I'm being honest. I think it handles flinch pretty well, all things considered, compared to other sniper rifles. And it feels like the hitboxes on it are pretty big. And again, if you can consistently get the golden guns, you pretty much just get free kills whenever you want. This thing is awful, memey, but awful. Now, Symmetry. I'm gonna honestly put it in B tier. I think this thing is so good and nobody gives it credit. Granted, the base scout rifle isn't the greatest, but the fact that you can two-tap people with those little orb, like secondary fire mode, is really, really strong. I've been wanting to make a build or a video on Symmetry for so long now, and I just haven't gotten around to doing it. So I'd expect to see that at some point, especially because I'm trying to make videos on kind of some exotics that people have forgotten about, such as the Monte Carlo video that I talked about earlier. But I would expect to see a Symmetry video. This thing is actually so much better than a lot of people give it credit for. Super, super good, and also a lot of fun. Soros Regime, I think it's good. I'm going to put it in B tier with the other B tier options, just because I think it's very similar to Centrifuge, where it's good, but it's not like the best by any means. There are definitely better ARs. I think Kvostov and Monte Carlo are both better than it currently, but it is still really, really good. I think I'm going to put it low A tier, actually. I think low A tier is roughly where it belongs. I think you're going to want to use the spinning up one over the focus fire one, because the spinning up one just kills faster, and the healing on it isn't bad as well. But yeah, I would say probably B+, but we'll put it in A just to, you know, set it there. Sleeper Simulant, it's a heavy. We'll just put it in D. There's not really a reason to put it anywhere else. It can one shot, but there's just better heavies, obviously. Sweet Business. It can get the job done, but we're just going to put it in D. We'll put it at the high end of D, because honestly, depending on the lobby you're in, if somebody challenges you while you're revved up, you pretty much just melt them, but most higher skill players are not going to do that, or they'll throw a grenade, or they'll make it so you have to stop shooting. But for the most part, it can be pretty memeable, but not the greatest. Sturm, actually a fantastic 120. The only issue is it doesn't really have an exotic perk if you don't use Drang, but like the base stat package on it is amazing. And the fact that it has 12 in the mag, just a fantastic 120. Honestly, if they rearranged the catalyst and just gave it an extra perk on it to make it so it could, you know, do something else, give it like Eye of the Storm or like a slide shot or something, or obviously Precision Instrument would make it like actually broken. But like this thing is really, really good. If you do not have a good 120 right now, then I would just pull this out. It's super strong and feels amazing. Sunshot. Sunshot's in an interesting place. We are going to put it... we'll put it in B. Just because it is a 150 hand cannon, which is the only one in the game currently, which is great. It's amazing. We love that. But the issue is the low aim assist just makes it harder to duel with. If it had a little bit higher aim assist, this thing I think would shoot up to S tier, but the aim assist just makes it harder to shoot, where most other hand cannons are at like 90, 95 aim assist nowadays. This thing is just so low with its like 60. It just makes it so you have to be way more, it just makes it so you have to be way more precise than you would for most other hand cannons, which arguably should be most hand cannons. Honestly, I think most hand cannons should have, you know, 60 aim assist, but that's just me. Skyburner's Oath, honestly, not as bad as a lot of people would like make it out to be. The hipfire slugs actually prevents people from healing, and if you use things such as incendiary grenades, it can make it super easy to ignite. So if you really build craft into this thing, I think honestly it's more so A tier. But if you're just for the weapon itself, we're just going to put it in C tier. And you also have to get really good with it to really make it work, be able to see certain situations. But honestly, even the ADS is really good. We're going to put it in low B tier. I think it's definitely lower B tier. I think I would rather use Skyburner's Oath in most situations than most of these weapons. But it's still a scout rifle at the end of the day, so it depends on the map. But again, if you build craft into it, being able to defend yourself with grenades and ignitions from close range, it kind of becomes like a different version of DMT, if I'm being honest. So very, very strong in the right hands. This exotic, I think it's a D. I don't think it's awful. I think you can make a play, especially if you consume your grenade, you can fire out the thing. It can be pretty deadly, but for the most part, I don't really see a reason to use it that much. One thing to note is your harmonizer mods will almost always work for you, which is great, just because it matches with whatever your super is, but meh. Navigator, awful, no reason to use it, just don't. Manticore, or the Manticore, I think it's good. It's a lot to get used to. If you blink with it, I think it's better. I'll put it in mid C tier. It's just not the greatest, but I think if you get good with it and get used to it, again, it can be somewhat decent. And always having a damage buff and a damage resistance, it's just obviously when you're in the air, it makes you kind of a very easy target to hit. But the thing is just if you use blink, you can kind of nullify that. I don't know. It's good. I've used it and I kind of enjoy it, but it takes a bit to get used to. Touch of Malice. Now, I think Touch of Malice is a little underrated. I think it actually is pretty good, especially if you play like the floating Warlock playstyle where you can surprise people. But I'm just going to put it in C. It's better than Mida, but not much, if we're being honest. But I do think it does have a play, and I would be very curious to honestly make a video on this one as well, even though it is an older exotic, just to really like test the limits of it. I've used it a couple times, and I do think it is pretty good. It's just very, very risky. We have Trespasser. I think this is definitely like an A tier exotic. Very, very good. One of the few sidearms that feels really good on M and K as well. And for controller players, I'm sure it's just as good. And the super burst, if you build into it using like backers or something, you can literally one burst people and take them out if you hit all headshots. Very strong sidearm, feels really good. I love me some Trespasser. Then we have Tikus, which it's pretty bad. It's awful. There were some plays that you could do with it, like causing people to ignite, but the fact that you have to hit people twice, and most smart players, if you hit them with the first tracking shot, they're just not going to challenge you again, so it's pretty bad. Lament, not good. Traveler's Chosen, I think this is an S tier pick. Fantastic sidearm, helps you get a bunch of abilities back, and as well as just feels amazing on M and K and controller. Just one of the best sidearms in the game. Super, super strong. Tommies, we'll put it in D. Not really a reason to use Tommies. It can be kind of fun. I personally have a special place in my heart with it because I've got my first I made it this for you. That's the 50 streak using this thing, hilariously enough. So for me, I have a little bit of a soft spot for Tommies, but in terms of it actually being meta, it can get the job done, but not really a reason to use it, if we're being honest. Fourth Horseman, awful. Don't use it. Truth isn't terrible. We'll put it in C. The proximity is kind of nice. The amount of ammo that it can hold would be nice if we had more ammo in PvP, but again, just better heavies. And your exotic slot is better spent elsewhere, but it's not a bad rocket. Taraba, this is definitely an A tier. Once you get that perk going, you just shred through whoever you're shooting at. Super, super good. Obviously, SMGs aren't the most meta right now, but I do think they are really good still, especially if you can position yourself somewhat correctly. They can kill really fast as long as you hit headshots. And yeah, the perk is just nuts. Thorn, we are going to put this one in A tier as well. I know a lot of times when I do videos saying best weapons, so many people are like, where's Thorn? Where's Thorn? Why did you put Ace and Hawkmoon and not Thorn? But it's because I think Thorn is just worse than Ace and Hawkmoon. And that's coming from somebody, my most used hand cannon is Thorn. I love Thorn. I have so many kills on Thorn. And it's just like, it's not better than Ace or Hawkmoon. It's just the perk that you have to do to make it more lethal. You have to go out there and get the Remnant, which can be really difficult in Trials of Osiris, where, you know, if they're teaming together, even if you take them down, you're not going to get it. Where Ace, you just take the kill, then you reload and you're good to go. Hawkmoon, you don't even need to get a kill to get its perk. And then Thorn, also the burn. Nowadays, it's only really used to prevent them from healing, which isn't bad, don't get me wrong, but it's like, it doesn't really do a whole lot. You don't get that many burn kills, but the base hand cannon, especially with the catalyst and it having killing wind on it, makes it feel great. And it's just like, it is a good hand cannon. It's just not S tier in my honest opinion. Last word, I think it's very strong, obviously more of a controller based weapon, but I do think it is A tier. I think last word, it pretty much aims for you on controller, the amount of aim assist that it has. And then in terms of M and K, I know most people think it's terrible on M and K. People are going to be like, put it in D if it's M and K, but I think it's a B tier for M and K, if I'm being honest with you. The thing about last word that makes it so difficult to use is that you actually have to aim it. Last word can be very strong if you have good aim on mouse and keyboard, but in my opinion, why would you use a gun that is very strong that you really have to aim? You have to focus a lot on hitting headshots, like, and actually hitting them, because it just doesn't have a whole lot of bullet magnetism compared to other guns in this game, when you can just use something that will aim for you. Why use last word when you can use Traveler's Chosen? Why use last word when you can use an SMG like Taraba that aims for you? But I do think if you can aim and you wear like Lucky Pants or something on mouse and keyboard, it is probably a B tier. It can be good and a lot of fun to use. It's just, again, you actually have to try and work for it. Trinity, great for momentum. Any other thing, pretty bad. There are some players that really make it work. I know I've seen a few people with a lot of like Crucible kills on their Trinity that are very good using it with their arc bolt grenades and other things. And you can be really good with it, but for most people, it's just not good. Two-Tail Fox, really bad. Chaperone, this is an S tier slug shotgun. The amount of range that it has is absurd. I believe it's like 11 meters, and then that's before Roadborne, and the hitboxes on this thing is huge. I love my Chaperone, and again, that's an M and K. I know a lot of people more so say it's a controller weapon, but it's still really strong on M and K too. It's just such a good weapon. Huckleberry, I think Huckleberry is a B tier pick. Very strong SMG, great for kill chaining, reloads after every single kill. You pair it with like Devour or something, it can be really, really strong. It's kind of like very similar to Necrochasm, great for like pub stomping, and then other stuff. It's not the greatest, but I think it is really good SMG nonetheless. Telesto, if you can get good with Telesto, it's actually not bad. I'm going to put it, I would either low B or C. We're going to put it in C just because for the most part, it's not the greatest fusion in the world, but the range that this thing can have is really insane. If you can get good with Telesto, as a lot of these really janky exotics, it can be strong, but I still think there's better picks. So we'll put it C, maybe low B, depending on the player you are. Jade Rabbit, very, very strong. I'm going to put it right next to Polaris Lance because I think they're very similar. I think Jade Rabbit's probably a little bit better, but very, very strong. Honestly, we're going to actually put it more higher in the A tier. Now, this isn't organized like the most in tier list, but I'm trying a little bit. But nonetheless, I think it's definitely like a high A tier, which I think it's just below S tier. The only thing is a scout rifle. So it's like where most of these other guns you can make work on most maps. Like if you really try. Jade Rabbit, if you're playing this on Endless Vale, it is going to be very difficult. You can make it work if you really play out towards B and you kind of just float around with a Warlock. But for the most part, it's very map dependent. On any if it's a big map, I think it's like S plus tier. If you're playing on like Disjunction, this thing's fantastic. But for most other maps, I would just leave it on A tier. Very strong. Love me some Jade Rabbit. The stability is great. And yeah, just very strong pick. Colony, great for momentum control, awful for everything else. Queen Bakers, D. You can get the job done, but there's still better stuff. Wardcliff, we'll put Wardcliff in B. I think it's good. It gets us the job done. It can be a little janky with the hit detection sometimes, but overall, it can get you a lot of multi-kills. Just a good heavy weapon. Again, there are better, but pretty good. Awful. Tractor Cannon, C, can get the job done again. Great for shutting down supers. And if anybody pushes you, it's really easy to take them down. Thunderlord, I think, is a very good pick. I think Hammerhead is better, but we'll put it bottom of A tier just because it's a really good machine gun. You can just get a lot of kills with it. Again, I think Hammerhead's better because it has kill perks and as well as fourth time the charm, which I value a lot in quick play just because it makes it so you can get more ammo. But very strong pick. Typically, if I'm not using an exotic slot, I'll sometimes just throw on Thunderlord just as a, fun gun. Vexcalibur. Yeah, we'll put it in awful. It's not very good. It's a glaive. It fires out shotgun bolts, and the overshield's kind of whatever. Bow, really bad. Now, Vex. I was an avid Vex enjoyer. I loved Vex back in the day. But now it just feels really, really bad. Even with the Vex builds, it's just like, I'm going to put it in C. They nerfed the fire rate on it for whatever reason, and it just feels really bad, which sucks. I really hope Vex gets a buff at some point. The linear fusion rifle mode is really, really strong, but like just the base shooting experience of Vex just isn't good. I don't know what they did to it, and they just destroyed it for whatever reason. But hopefully one day it gets a buff, but you can still kind of get the job done in quick play, but it's just like, it's bad. There's a reason you don't see it in it anymore. I used to see it a fair amount back in the day because it used to be really, really good, but C tier, can't really put it much higher than that. Vigilant Swing, it's not bad. The issue is it's a 5-round pulse rifle, so you have to hit most of your shots to make that work. With other pulse rifles, it's like you only need to hit 3 with like no time. I think it's a low B tier. It's a good primary. It can get the job done in trials. It has some like nice benefits. If your teammates die, you can get some nice handling from being around your teammates. And overall, it's just a very average gun in my opinion. But average doesn't necessarily mean a bad thing. It's average. Now, this bow was very strong when it first came out because you could one-shot people who are suspended, but I'm pretty sure you can't do that anymore. So that being the case, this thing is D. It's got some functionality being able to still be able to suspend people, but it's not worth it without the one-shots by any means. Wicked Implement. It's an okay scout rifle. We'll put it in C. The slows are nice, but for the most part, it doesn't really do a whole lot. Better scout rifles out there. Winter's Bite. It could be a fun heavy. We'll put it in C. The little freeze thing can shatter a whole bunch of people, and it being a glaive in the heavy slot can be kind of funny because you can pull it out and smack people with it even when you don't have ammo. Funny exotic, not necessarily a good exotic. Witherhoard, actually a pretty strong pick if I'm being honest with you. I'm more inclined to put it in like A tier, but we're just going to put it in B for right now. We'll put it top of B, but honestly, it's not a bad pick by any means. I think it pairs very well with like SMGs, if I'm being honest with you, help pushing people off. And if you stick somebody, obviously you take them out with that. But Witherhoard, very underrated pick for PvP in my honest opinion. Then we have the Wallhack bow, and I still think this thing is really good. Like, it got nerfed a little bit, but I'm going to put it low A tier. If you get good with this thing, still really strong being able to have wall hacks wherever you go, and the chunk of damage that you can do with this thing, still really strong. Wave Splitter. I think Wave Splitter is better than our Freezy boy, so we'll just put it ahead of that in B tier. Still really good. Nowhere near as good as Prometheus Lens, but it's still good. It can get the job done, and if you build craft into it a little bit using like G-Falcon and whatnot, it can shred. It can shred. World Line Zero, awful. Don't use it. No point. Whisper can be a lot of fun in quick play. I'll put it in C. It just gets you a lot of... It's just essentially if you like to snipe, essentially. I think it pairs pretty nicely like next to Darcy, so it just depends on which one you want. I think it's probably a little bit better than Darcy because it does have Mulligan on it, And overall, it can just be a fun, quick play pick if you want to snipe. Nothing super crazy, but having a lot of sniper rounds, especially if you are a good sniper, can come into play, and great for the clips, of course. Then Xenophage. There's just not enough ammo for this thing to be good, even when you pick it up. It can be good for Gambit, but for actual quick play, there's not really or PvP rather, not just quick play. It's pretty bad. But with that should be all the exotics. Obviously, these top ones are just really good. I think if you use any of these in PvP, like, nobody would question you, to be honest with you. They're just super, super good. And then, like, B tier, like I said, just kind of your average picks. And then once we go down and get down to here, there's a lot of, like, really bad exotics. And just because they're down here doesn't mean you can't use them and they won't succeed. Like, you can put Mida on and go flawless. But it's like, if you put on Jade Rabbit instead of Mida, you probably would have had a way easier time going flawless. But this is my PvP tier list. Let me know how you feel about it. I'm sure I'm going to get yelled at because they're tier list videos and people yell at me all the time about how could you put this here, this there, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, there are a lot of exotic weapons. And like I said, I kind of did it roughly in alphabetical order. So I'm not going to timestamp everything because honestly, that would take forever. If one of you guys want to do it, feel free. Put it down in the comments. I'll pin it. But for the most part, if you're looking for a certain weapon, just, look for it through that. And remember, a lot of weapons start with the, so they made it to the, T side of the alphabetical. But if you did enjoy the video, please remember to like and subscribe, as it does help out with the channel a lot. Thank you so much and have a good rest of your day.